So tonight I wanted to talk to you about a couple of different books I've designed and how different parameters have influenced the form and shape of the book. And I've chosen a selection of a couple of books to show you these different influences and how the books turned up. So the first book, Rhythm Section, is a book I designed for the ICA. And actually for this book, the ICA didn't want to do a book, they didn't have any budget, and with the curator we decided to do a book with our own money. And so one of the parameters was that we didn't have a lot of money and that we had to get it done very quickly. And just to explain the content, it was texts from journalists from the Wire magazine, and they were writing about their favorite tracks. And so the idea was to do a little book which had a sort of animated feel, and I came up with this idea of a scale. So it's very lo-fi, and the parameter being that we didn't have a lot of money, I printed it with Lulu, and we only did free, and we put free in the exhibition space. And then the ICA printed more. Eventually they were convinced. This book, Existere, is a book I did for a collective of free artists. These three artists basically did a performance called Existere, and no one was allowed to photograph or record this performance. And one of the traces of this performance was a cloth that they did the performance on. And so when they came up to me to design the book, they said, well, we only have this amount of cloth. And the idea was to do as many books as possible with the cloth. So one of the challenges also with this cloth was that it was so thin that no one wanted to work with us to do the binding of the book. And we eventually find a printer and a binder who were ready to take on the challenge. And so this is the cloth from the performance. And we managed to fit 80 books on this cloth. And then on the inside, it was a very simple book with basically texts talking about the performance. So there were only traces of drawings people had made or notes people had taken during the performance. And you can't really see this on the slides, but the paper is like skin. It has this emboss that feels like fingerprints. And that was to reflect also on the idea that the artist did this performance naked on the cloth, and just to reflect on the idea of flesh. This project, I did a few books for Tommy Ungerer while I was at Phaidon, and often the brief was, they didn't want a lot of design intervention on these books. And a lot of these books existed in previous editions of French and German. And so they asked me to come up with a way of repackaging the book. And I guess why I wanted to show you this tonight as well is that often, the space you have on designing a book can be quite minimal, but it can be a little decision that can make the book take a new life. So on these books, basically the previous editions were all black covers, looking very harsh, and the age group for these books is really, really, really little. It's up to 3 years old, I think. And the idea here was to change the CMYK for fluoro Pantone colors. And Tommy Ungerer was involved in this, and he was very happy with the idea. And yeah, so that's just to show a small intervention on a book design. Then this is another project I did at Phaidon for the baker Eric Kaiser. And that was quite a particular project as well, because the French book existed, and they said to me, you have to redesign it, but you have to use all the existing imagery. And one thing that Phaidon usually does is they take new photography for each project. So it was a bit of a challenge because the imagery wasn't the type of imagery we would usually use in cookbooks. And again, there was quite little time, so I had to work with these existing parameters. One thing I do when I start a project is that I look for a long time for the right typeface, well, the typeface that I think is right for the project. And I get really tortured about finding the right typeface. And this was a little bit cheeky, but I had been looking at this typeface for a long time, and I really wanted to use it for a project. And when the project came up, and I saw the B of the typeface, I thought, this is the B for bread. And what I really liked about it is that it feels really like it's been carved, and the book talks a lot about carving techniques to make bread and to give the shape to bread. And I liked how the typography could reflect on the idea of making bread as well. And then I thought I'd show you on this little case study a couple of cover options I did. One thing at Phaidon is that we always presented quite a lot of cover options, and this was always to kind of give counter arguments to what we thought would work and not work. And sometimes we had the sales team saying, oh, well, one piece of bread will work much better than something that is in craft paper printed in a monotone. So I tried a lot of options, and I was pretty fixed since the beginning that I wanted to do a cover which showed the different types of breads. The book is divided, showing the different types of breads. And I thought that's what makes this book special, because there's so many books about bread that I like the idea that the book looked like the front of a little pastry shop. And so that was the cover that was chosen eventually. And then I had to do a couple of iterations. And then the sales team, a couple of months later, came back in and said, we're never going to sell a book with so many breads on the cover. It's not commercial enough. We want one piece of bread. And eventually they were saying, we want the piece of bread that the Larousse book used on their cover. So I tried one piece of bread, and eventually that's the cover. And the reason why we changed from brown to blue also is that the brown, for me I was thinking, brown, pastry shop, wrapping bags, chocolate, and they wanted something that felt, I don't know, let's say more fun. So I guess that's the thing as well, is it's all about compromise and finding the right tone with all the teams involved. And I managed to save a bit of my concept on the back cover. So these are a couple of spreads on the inside, just to show you. And then another project. So Sampé, so basically Phaidon published a lot of books for Sampé, and the challenge with these books is that Sampé is not well known in the States, even though he did a lot of covers for the New Yorker, but that doesn't make him sellable enough. And the challenge was to find a cover that would initiate people to Sampé in the States and potentially in the UK. And so I came up with this idea it doesn't seem very clear on the screen, but I came up with this idea to use little cartoons to illustrate each of the chapters of the book. This is another book where I wanted to talk about the idea of how often you can really be involved in the editorial aspect of the book. James Servan is a product designer, if you don't all know him already. And the real challenge with this book is that there was so much material, so many images, and there was no editorial direction apart from I had to come up with a design concept, and I had thousands and thousands of images, materials. So I'm going to accelerate because I have 1 minute left. So I'll show you this. And yeah, and that's the final book I wanted to show you, which I've done for an exhibition I did recently. And it's called Le Théâtre Graphique, the graphic theater. And I wanted to show you this book because it's just a bit of a different steer from what I've been doing before. It has no words, no typography, and it's a little animation of the sun and the sea and going to the stage. And that's it.